In a city where tech and mystery collide, Hikaru Amatsuga's quiet life flips upside down when a strange explosion on a distant skyscraper draws his gaze. He never expected that the very next day he'd find himself pursued by drones, with a sentient, mysterious mechanical arm clinging to him for survival. Pedaling through the futuristic city of Kitakagami, the protagonist of this story suddenly has his attention drawn to a strange occurrence on top of a building. Just minutes earlier, inside the building, armed security guards discovered that an important item was being stolen by a young woman. Using the robotic limbs attached to her body, she skillfully climbs the structure with incredible ease and makes it back to the balcony, only to be met by dozens of men aiming their weapons at her. Then, a tattoo on her leg emits a strange glow, enhancing her metallic limbs. Witnessing this, one of the guards shouts that she's a mecha-Yude user. The machine's speed and strength were unreal, but the security team had anti-mecha-Yude weapons and managed to immobilize her. At that moment, a man with mechanical limbs of his own shows up to retrieve the stolen item. The girl's machine, which seems to have a life of its own, is shocked to see another of its kind working against its species. But the man claims that mecha-Yudes are nothing more than tools for humans. He then pulls the item back with his bladed chains, but the girl commands Sinus and Dex to devour the enemy. Her metallic limbs break free from their restraint and charge at him, igniting an intense battle. During the fight, security begins firing again, but the woman evades the bullets and keeps fighting. After a fierce exchange of blows, she manages to retrieve the item from her opponent's hand, but a crack in the glass causes the object to explode, emitting a beam of light that the protagonist saw from a distance. Following the explosion, a cube leaks out from the container and falls off the building. The next day, Hikaru Amatsuga wakes up to a voice in his head asking for help. At the same time, his alarm clock rings, completing its job. A while later, Hikaru leaves the house with his bag. Around the city, advertisements and drones from Kagami Corporation line every corner as Hikaru takes a crowded subway, still wondering what happened the day before. While researching, he finds an article on the life's work of Naohito Kagami. In the comments, someone mentions that it's pointless for regular people to even try. Just then, a man falls asleep on Hikaru's shoulder, interrupting his reading. Standing in the subway, a pregnant woman catches his attention and two older ladies are probably gossiping about the young man's lack of manners. But Hikaru is simply trapped by the sleepy passenger. Turning back to his phone, he sees an ad for Kitakagami Prep School, which makes him start sweating nervously. As Hikaru remains frozen, the sleeping guy gives up his seat to the pregnant woman. In reality, Hikaru remembers he forgot something and needs to get off. But three schoolmates approach him in the subway to chat on the way to school. During their conversation, someone mentions receiving a sports ball, and Tagawa says that when it comes to baseball, Ikumo Kagami is the biggest celebrity in Kitakagami. But now it's going to be the era of the monster Kosu Tagawa. The prep school ad had the slogan, "Take a step forward, seize your future." But Tagawa thinks regular people like them are struggling precisely because they can't take that step forward. He asks Hikaru's opinion on the matter, but Hikaru was zoning out on his phone and didn't hear anything. Meanwhile, the girl with the mecha-Yude learns from her mechanical arm that the cube must be nearby. After taking his eyes off his phone, Hikaru tells the story of what happened the day before. According to him, after thinking he heard a voice, he looked out the window and saw the area around the Kagami building glowing in a strange way. When he climbed to a high spot for a better view, the building exploded and he recorded it. Along with the explosion, a glowing object was falling from the building, but none of it was caught on camera. At that moment, a girl named Shirayama joins the group to see what's going on, and Tagawa tells her that Hikaru's been having bizarre hallucinations about voices and things exploding. Another friend asks what the voice sounded like, and Hikaru, embarrassed, admits it was someone asking for help. As soon as he says this, he feels an intuition that the voice came from a certain direction. So the protagonist runs off without explaining further to his friends. Hikaru reaches a place where crossing is prohibited, and a police officer makes that very clear. Once the officer leaves, Hikaru hears the voice even more clearly, so he crosses the "Do Not Pass" line and heads toward a grated door, where the back of the room was completely dark. Mustering his courage, Hikaru enters and finds the cube that fell from the building, trying to figure out if the voice came from inside the object. When the cube finally asks for help right in front of him, Hikaru realizes it wasn't just his imagination. Suddenly, the item climbs onto Hikaru's hoodie and emits that same intense light that could be seen from miles away, catching the attention of the girl with the mechanical limbs. A robotic arm emerges from the cube and slowly realizes it's safe. Hikaru spins around trying to understand what's happening and eventually notices something clinging to his back. Naturally, he's utterly shocked and trembling with fear, while the mechanical arm thanks him for saving it and tries to introduce itself, though it seems to have forgotten its own name. Panicking, Hikaru tries to pull the robotic arm off, But as it starts to cry, Hikaru apologizes, still confused. Just then, a delivery drone from Kagami Group announces that the target has been located, identifying Hikaru as a potential RM's member. The drone pursues him with spinning blades. Hikaru runs for it, with the metallic arm grabbing onto his pants to avoid being left behind. However, this causes Hikaru's pants to fall, making him trip. At that moment, Hikaru offers the robotic arm to the drone, thinking it's the target they're after. But when attacked, the arm manages to repel the enemy and shut it down. Still, several other drones appear with the same mission, and the robotic arm warns Hikaru that they must work together to escape. In the meantime, in a gigantic office building, an important man learns that the trigger arm has been found and that it made contact with someone unrelated to the company, likely a civilian. Upon hearing this, the company's president, Naohito Kagami, decides to leave the resolution of the problem to his subordinates. One of them orders a perimeter of 2 miles to be established around the area where the civilian was spotted, with instructions that the trigger arm must be recovered at all costs, regardless of what happens to the kid. Speaking of the devil, Hikaru and his unlikely new friend hide to avoid being spotted by the drones, and their plan works. Soon, they are safe. Relieved, Hikaru asks what the robotic arm is exactly, but that's a question the arm can't answer, since it doesn't even remember its own name. However, it does know one thing: the boy standing before it is kind. Hikaru responds that he hasn't done anything special, but the arm insists it was saved, explaining that without arbitrium, it wouldn't be able to move as well as it is. Hikaru questions what arbitrium is, but the robot ignores the question and instead asks for the boy's name. Returning the favor, Hikaru ignores the question and simply wishes the arm good luck in life. Despite the robot's pleas, the boy turns his back and walks away. But as the trigger arm nearly loses all its power, Hikaru becomes concerned and runs back to check what happened. With that, the arm functions at full capacity again. Hikaru, now frustrated, walks away once more, but the cycle repeats itself. Each time Hikaru distances himself from the machine, it weakens. Realizing there's no other way, the boy gives in and stays by the robot's side. During this interval, drones locate the pair, so the trigger arm takes charge, dashing off with Hikaru and Tao, quite literally driving him along the ground without a care. A Kagami employee observes the situation from above, assuming the drones will handle everything, allowing him to focus on the girl who should be nearby. Speaking of her, Aki Murasame is guided by her mechanical arms towards the path where the mysterious being originated. When faced with a narrow fork in the road, she decides to cross it anyway, knowing it would shorten her journey. Back to Hikaru, he manages to take control of the sprint, escaping on his own 2 feet, but his exhaustion isn't much better than being dragged. That's when Aki catches up to him and takes charge, bringing Sinus and Dex back into the fight. With ease, the machines destroy all the enemy drones, and the woman turns to the trigger arm, calling it Alma and warning it not to move unless it wants to die. One of Aki's arms insists she must first promise to protect them, but the other arm argues that it no longer matters. Then the mysterious Kagami employee reappears, eager to settle the score for what Aki did to him the previous night. Aki replies that she has no business with the man, while Hikaru and Alma attempt to escape through the narrow path. The girl moves to pursue the duo, but the enemy reacts and prevents her from leaving. Amid the chaos, Hikaru crosses the fork and evades more drones. Aki is furious at the interference of her rival, while the protagonist starts losing his composure amidst this wild and sudden turn of events in his life. Even though he manages to keep running, the exhaustion is catching up to him. Seeing this, Alma offers to stay behind, saying that Kagami is after him, not the boy, and if there's one thing Alma doesn't want, it's for this kind-hearted kid to get hurt for no reason. At that moment, Aki finds the pair after defeating the Kagami employee, now free to carry out her mission. Alma promises to obey the girl if she lets the boy go, but Hikaru remembers reading a report that said ordinary people never even get a chance, and so he decides not to leave the mechanical arm alone in this mess. Seeing that Hikaru is going to resist, Aki sees no choice but to use force, readying her mecha Yude for battle. As this happens, Alma asks for Hikaru's trust and urges him to take a step forward, saying that only by working together will they have a chance. Upon hearing this, the boy recalls the advertisements for Kagami's prep school, always trying to convince people that life is easy, which fills him with a surge of anger, propelling him to charge at the adversary. In that instant, Alma activates its mechanism, multiplying in size and strength. With a powerful punch, it slams Aki into the ground. With that, Hikaru and his robotic companion get the chance to escape, and that's exactly what they do. Around the perimeter, other Kagami employees are closing in, searching for the fugitives, while the boy and his metal arm take the most improbable paths to avoid being found. Amidst the escape, Hikaru mentions he heard Alma's name from the woman and introduces himself to the mecha Yude. Meanwhile, A young boy collapses in exhaustion upon discovering someone has stolen Alma from him. Using an inhaler, he tries to catch his breath, furiously declaring that the trigger arm belongs to him. At the same time, the leader of a group rivaling Kagami's, to which Aki belongs, laments her failure but emphasizes that Alma must be recovered before it falls into enemy hands. With this in mind, Aki is sent back on the same mission. Without delay, the investigators quickly identify the boy who tried to escape with the trigger arm, a random middle schooler who got caught up in the whole mess. According to investigator Tuz, finishing him off would be a cruel order. On the other hand, her partner, Warner, replies that this demonstrates the importance of the trigger arm and then questions if she has feelings for the boy. Tuz responds by pinching his leg hard, stating that it's because of people like him they are never taken seriously. Warner acknowledges that Tuz works hard, and she assures him that she wouldn't hesitate even if it was against a child. When Hikaru went to the school bathroom, he never imagined that woman would follow him to the ends of the earth. Alma appeared to comment that, surprisingly, Aki wasn't showing any signs of wanting to fight. Hikaru added that they probably wouldn't be attacked even in the classroom, so Alma suggested they talk to Aki, saying there was so much going on in that earlier mess that they didn't even have time to say anything. But he was sure that woman just wanted to chat. Hikaru remembered Aki making it very clear she intended to kill him, so he wasn't too convinced by that story. In fact, he thought it might be better to call the police or something. Lost in his thoughts, Hikaru was caught off guard when he realized Alma had unrolled the entire toilet paper roll, practically covering them both in the bathroom. According to the arm, the contraption was so fascinating he just couldn't help it. And then, out of nowhere, Aki appeared and suggested that the young man shouldn't say anything to the police because the officers were just pawns of the Kagami group. If they caught Hikaru, they would deliver him straight to the boss. Amidst this chaos, Aki offered to be his bodyguard. Desperate, Hikaru complained that this was the men's bathroom and bolted out of there as fast as he could, still wrapped in a bunch of toilet paper. Shirayama saw the chaos unfold before her eyes, but what terrified her was the sight of Aki chasing after him just as relentlessly. Later, Hikaru met up with his friends who wanted to know what his deal was with Aki. The poor guy tried to explain that he was literally being chased, but his friends didn't believe him, thinking he was just hiding something. Speak of the devil, when Aki showed up again, one kid casually pointed out where Hikaru was, but by then he'd already taken off and managed to hide. Suddenly, Shirayama approached Aki and introduced herself. Seeing that the girl seemed extremely agitated, she offered Aki a box of cookies. While Shirayama explained the flavors represented in the package, Alma and Hikaru were scared out of their minds that this crazy woman might hit the girl or something. But to their surprise, Aki dove into the sweets without a second thought, as if there was nothing to worry about. In fact, the two seemed to be developing a friendship, even though Aki clearly had no talent for social interactions. Since Shirayama was more open and extroverted, the two got along, leaving Hikaru wondering what in the world was going on. Alma suggested the boys should go talk to Aki now, but Hikaru had a better idea: sleep. Alma grumbled, but the boy explained that he couldn't talk about the mechanical arm while at school. Setting that aside, Alma asked what Hikaru had just pulled from his pocket. Hikaru explained that they were headphones used for listening to music and things like that. These particular ones had a noise-canceling feature, eliminating all the surrounding noise. Hearing this, Alma was fascinated. As this strange interaction played out, Shirayama brought up Hikaru's situation with Aki, whispering advice to her. When Hikaru returned to school, Alma continued insisting he talk to Aki, but the boy didn't feel emotionally ready. Shirayama chased after him and handed him a note from Aki, in which the strange girl asked to meet him in the art room of the old school building after class. Shirayama scolded her friend, saying that Aki had been looking for him all day but couldn't find him, leaving Hikaru speechless in the middle of this crazy situation. Figuring he was just shy about meeting new people or something, the girl dragged Hikaru to the meeting spot with Aki, telling him to accept that woman's love with all his heart. Hikaru then came face to face with her inside the room and thought that the mecha wielder had used Shirayama to get what she wanted. However, Aki made it clear that it was Maru herself who had planned it all. Hearing Aki use Shirayama's first name made Hikaru lose his mind, as they had literally just met that day. Putting that aside, he wanted to know what this crazy girl wanted. Aki explained that she was a member of ARMS and had been tasked with protecting the trigger arm. Her first mission was to take it back to HQ, but since Hikaru had bonded with the arm, they had no choice but to take the human along as well. Alma admitted he would like to know more about himself since he had no idea who he was anymore, so Hikaru accepted the conditions, especially since Alma grew weak whenever they were apart. Aki tried to figure out why all this was happening, and anxious about the whole situation, Hikaru tried to get her attention. One of the arms told him to be quiet because Aki was terrible at thinking about difficult things. Finally, she declared that they needed to examine the robotic arm as soon as possible, and that Hikaru had no choice in the matter. So Hikaru asked if Alma could get big again like he did earlier to fend off threats. The mecha Yude did as requested, unleashing all his power. Aki was impressed by the display, but as the arm lost all its strength in a matter of seconds, Hikaru grabbed the arm and bolted before things could go wrong. Just as Alma was complaining that the human couldn't be running in the hallway, Aki was chasing the two of them with all her fury. Shirayama pokes his head in and reminds his friend that he needs to talk to Aki properly, causing Hikaru to panic and search desperately for an escape from the place. Meanwhile, Toos is trying to track down his target inside the old school, while Warner informs him that a student is guarding the entrance so he can't get close. Hikaru finds himself trapped inside and realizes his last chance of escape is by going up the stairs. One of Aki's arms directs her to the fire escape, while another suggests the opposite direction for no logical reason. Despite this, she chooses to go down. Before long, a hole starts to open in the ceiling of the floor where Hikaru is. By the time he realizes he's already under Aki Murasame's control. She confesses that she didn't understand why the boy didn't finish her off when she was defenseless, but he has no clue what she's talking about. Regardless, she demands to know what Hikaru's intentions are with Alma, even though her own arm tries to explain that the kid has no ill will. Despite this, Aki orders the two of them to prove the bond they share, and her arm starts emitting its power again but soon grows weak. Faced with this, Aki declares that Hikaru is only harming the trigger arm, so she'll have to get rid of the boy. Shirayama bursts in, misinterpreting the situation, and runs off immediately, thinking he's interrupting some kind of romantic moment between the two. Warner seizes the opportunity of the open door to break into the old school and go after Hikaru. Hikaru notices that the strange man is wearing a Kagami group uniform, while Warner reveals his mecha Yu to eliminate Alma's host. Using a sonic shot that stuns its target, the spy opens the door completely, giving Toos, who's ready with a long-range rifle, a clear line of sight to take the student out. Hikaru barely manages to escape and starts running again, while the spy keeps shooting him. Warner continues the chase until the boy is stunned again at the end of the hallway. The sniper locks onto her target and fires another shot, but Aki steps in to protect the innocent student with her metallic arm. With that, she reports back to her base saying she's found two chained mecha Yudes, but they don't seem to be of the worm type. Noticing Warner's presence, the arms member assumes he's a henchman from Akagami Group's Expansion Department 3. Alma asks what a chained mecha Yude is, and one of Aki's arms explains that the chain is a device that steals the consciousness of robots, turning them into slaves. With that, Aki tells Hikaru to hide with Alma while she handles the situation. As Hikaru retreats, Warner throws luminous blades at his enemy. Far from the action, Hikaru is already tired of running from these strange people, but he keeps going. Alma, on the other hand, doesn't believe they should be fleeing and rebels against this decision, refusing to leave Aki and the mecha Yudes behind. Hikaru threatens to stay behind out of fear of getting killed, but ultimately gives in and chases after the metallic arm. At the bottom of the stairs, Alma is almost collapsing from being so far away from the boy, so Hikaru approaches and asks the robot to stop acting tough, knowing the condition he's in. He then places the trigger arm on his shoulder and starts thinking of how he might fight back against that sonic shot. Meanwhile, Toos asks her partner for an update but gets no response, so she decides to head into the facility. Inside, the henchman had managed to immobilize and chain Aki's mecha Yudes. He offers her to use them as she pleases thanks to the chains, but she makes it clear that she's not like him. Either way, she is carried outside where Toos is waiting and wants to know what happened to the trigger arm. Her partner explains that it's hidden somewhere inside the old school, prompting Toos to change the subject and focus on Aki. She laments not being able to kill the arms member right then and there because her orders are to take her away. Fortunately for the Kagami thugs, Hikaru shows up carrying the organization's primary target. Despite the villain's confidence, Hikaru assures them it won't be as easy as last time. Ignoring this, Warner fires the sonic shot again, but this time the boy is prepared, wearing noise-canceling headphones. Having escaped the attack unscathed, the kid throws his metallic arm towards Aki, since her mecha Yudes need to be freed from the chains. The problem is, Hikaru always needs to stay close to the arm to keep it from malfunctioning, so he jumps towards Alma but gets hit by Toos' rifle, losing one side of his headphones in the process. Even so, the plan works and Aki is freed. Without hesitation, she uses Toos as a shield against the sonic shot and lunges at Warner. With her protection holding up, Aki is able to close the distance with the Kagami member and land a powerful blow. Since Toos had taken the sonic blast, she's also taken down. Finally, the entire fight causes the old school structure to collapse. Toos escapes, but Warner is left behind. Other ARMS members arrive at that moment and criticize Aki Murasayan for the mess she's caused, then ask about Alma. Meanwhile, security personnel from a facility decide to contact White Raven, as someone has stolen the artificial Mecha-Yude Ouroboros, which is extremely dangerous. Back to Kakaru, he is taken to ARMS headquarters, an organization that fights against the Akagami group and was formed to free the Mecha-Yudes from their chains. The leader of the organization introduces himself as Algis and says that the name of his Mecha-Yude is Fist. Fist calls Alma little brother and assures him that he will soon remember who he is. However, despite needing Alma's help, they make it clear that they don't need Hikaru. Meanwhile, a young man from ARMS walks through the streets while talking to someone via a device. That person mentions that a middle school boy managed to bring Alma back. The ARMS member admits he's never heard of a derise being made with a sweatshirt, just as the Ouroboros kid appears before him. Switching back to Kakaru, he's being used as a weight for Alma's daily push-ups, while confessing to Aki that it bothered him when they said he was useless to the resistance group. At that moment, a scientist from the organization said he had analyzed a few things while the kid was asleep. A scientist then showed on a screen the arbitrium that Hikaru currently possesses, a power generated by the human mind that fuels the Mecha-Yude. Unfortunately, Hikaru has far less arbitrium than what's necessary to be a carrier of this type of robot, which means he really wasn't born for this. The people around thought Quen, the scientist, had been too harsh on him, even though the kid truly had almost a negative value of arbitrium, making him worse off than an ordinary person. Therefore, Quen made it clear that Hikaru was only Alma's temporary host and doesn't possess any power, but the Trigger Arm himself stepped in to defend the boy who brought him there, boldly stating that Hikaru can accomplish anything if he tries and that he's a kind person who always helps those in need. After all, if it weren't for the kid, Alma wouldn't even be here now. Even so, Quen insisted that the numbers don't lie and thus Hikaru has no future in this. Aki responded that it's impossible to be certain of that because Hikaru showed he had the power to draw strength from the Trigger Arm, which is why she offered to train the novice. Reflecting on this, Hikaru questioned whether that's really necessary since he wasn't doing much in the training aside from being a weight for Alma. Aki then explained that arbitrium is a matter of spirit, and that the boy should stay motivated because it was he who said he wanted to help the robot arm. Amidst this, Aki receives a call from ARMS and summons her student to come along. Once there, they find out that incidents are occurring where thieves are stealing Mecha-Yudes from their carriers, with the third theft of the week just having happened. After passing along this information, Algis speculates that it might be a new Kagami agent group, so they need to act quickly to recover the stolen metal arms before it's too late. Alma is puzzled by the urgency, so one of Aki's arms explains that if a Mecha-Yude is forcibly removed from someone, the robot will die within a few days because the arbitrium starts leaking from the Derise point, even though they don't know everything about arbitrium. Fist mentions that it plays an important role in human biological functions. Obviously, anyone who forms a Derise with a Mecha-Yude gains extraordinary abilities, and while that may not be the case for Hikaru, they still can't afford to lose Alma under any circumstances. As for the boy who was victimized by the attack, Aki wants to know if it was a worm-type case. Algis cuts her off to remind her that her task is to protect Alma at all costs, and that emotions must not be involved. Hikaru is confused by this talk of emotions, but Aki replies that it has nothing to do with him. Then she calls her student over to take a look at something. Meanwhile, at the Kagami building, a subordinate informs the president that Jun's location has still not been discovered. One of Naohiro Kagami's trusted men says Jun has brought shame to the whole family by stealing an incomplete artificial Mecha-Yude. A boy named Todao, who was outside the conversation, believes someone from Division 3 promotion let them escape, and that if they need someone to handle the matter, they just need to call Shiro Garasu. Back with Aki, she's investigating the case on her own without informing the higher-ups. Nearby, a man named Imada is trying to find the CEO Kagami's younger brother. Alongside his Mecha-Yude Joe, the two set off as a team in search of Jun in the name of Shiro Garasu's honor. Suddenly, Aki shows up on the scene with Hikaru and asks if Imada knows anything about a worm-type Mecha-Yude carrier. Without delay, Shiro Garasu's henchmen charge at the girl, but she promptly summons Sinus and Dex to deal with the first wave of attacks. Seeing the damage his men suffered, Agami completely changes his attitude and assumes this intruder must be a member of ARMS. In the middle of this chaos, Hikaru notices a green-haired child hiding in a corner, struggling to breathe with an inhaler. So he rushes to help the kid without realizing it was June, but in a brief distraction, the child escapes. Agami orders Joe to transform, turning the mechanical arm into a motorcycle that leaps over the commotion and chases after the green-haired boy. A little further ahead, Hikaru is stopped alongside Aki by more Shiro Garasu henchmen, and just as one of them was about to hit him, Alma steps in to prevent it. The plan was to keep the trigger arm hidden, but he simply couldn't stand by while his friend was attacked. Imada arrives shortly after on his bike, and just as everyone watches the vehicles approach, Jun escapes. Regardless, Imada was closing in on Hikaru, so Alma starts running before things get worse. Obviously, the bike is faster and catches up to its targets. However, Aki steps in to restore order and end Shirogarazu's show. With a powerful kick, she unbalances Joe, causing him to flip over and throw his owner off. Having done that while being threatened with death by Aki, Agami swears he doesn't know anything and has never heard of any kind of worm. Aki's patience runs out and she throws a massive container near the enemy to scare him. Sinus and Dex then realize that those two really don't know anything because even under such a threat, they had no idea what to say. Afterward, she wants to know what was going through Hikaru's mind when he suddenly tried to escape. Even though the boy explains himself, Sinus and Dex refuse to accept any excuse, believing Hikaru wanted to run off on his own. Furious with him, Aki grabs the boy and makes it clear that Arms almost lost Alma because of him, and while she may have said he had some talent, right now he's still useless. As she said before, he doesn't need to do anything. If he's not going to help, he shouldn't get in the way either. At most, he just needs to stay by her side and keep quiet. Meanwhile, Jun had taken a picture of Alma after searching for him for so long. Hikaru also gets mad at his tutor's attitude and throws it back in her face that she's the one who brought him to this dangerous place, and now she's full of this nonsense, even though he doesn't even know what he's doing there. Tired of this nonsense, the boy decides to run away once and for all. The kid celebrates the fact that the two had argued, thinking it saved him the trouble of dealing with a woman, but Aki steps in front of him to resolve the situation. The boy then summons a power and reveals that he's a worm type, leaving his opponent stunned by his immense power. Elsewhere, Hikaru is crying while Alma keeps urging him to go back. Suddenly, his phone rings and it's from Aki's number, but it's actually the green-haired child who had taken her hostage. In exchange for the Arms member, the child demands Hikaru's mecha Yude, and fast, because they've ripped the mecha Yude from the girl, and everyone knows she's going to die soon if they don't act quickly. A meeting point is then given to Hikaru. In the middle of all this, All just contacts him, telling him not to leave until the bodyguard arrives. Once again, Hikaru hears that he's not capable of doing anything, which leaves him saddened. Alma, however, tries to lift the boy's spirits by reminding him how important he's been so far. Hikaru, on the other hand, believes that the metal arm is the reason he feels any courage to do anything, and that it's never an initiative of his own. With that in mind, he decides to head toward Jun against Alja's orders. Only then does he realize that the child he's facing is the same one he tried to help earlier. Alma assures him that they'll get Sinus and Dex back, but as he had already mentioned, the child couldn't care less about those old machines. He's only interested in Alma because whoever wields the trigger arm will possess unmatched strength. Unwilling to back down, Hikaru doesn't shrink from the situation, and the youngest Akagami charges at him with everything he's got. Alma takes responsibility for guiding their movements and his hosts, so Hikaru trusts his friend to dodge correctly. Even so, the enemy's power is so great that they can't get close to Sinus and Dex. On top of that, the child strikes a nerve with the protagonist, pointing out how weak people can't change anything in a situation like this. But if there's anyone who's heard that before, it's Hikaru. So the boy knows all too well what it's like to feel like a useless loser. Either way, he doesn't give up and charges at his opponent, and this time, he manages to land a punch fueled by pure rage. Taking a hit infuriates Jun to the point where he lashes out at his rival. Now with the whole battlefield wrapped in his power, he puts both targets under his control and resumes the attack. Jun's mecha Yude elements fire off electrical charges that hit Hikaru and Alma directly, practically ending the battle. Lastly, the youngest Akagami wraps his opponent in his tentacles and unleashes another charge, this time putting in so much power that he had to use his inhaler to catch his breath afterward. He thought the fight was won, but Alma had been playing dead, waiting for the right moment to counterattack with precision. However, the blow wasn't enough to defeat Jun, and Alma starts to suffer from the distance between him and his host. At this moment, Hikaru is flooded with memories of when he first met Alma and everything they've gone through to get to this point, so he pushes himself as hard as he can to close the gap between him and his mecha Yude. With great effort, the boy manages to touch the trigger arm, and this touch unleashes a devastating energy explosion as the fusion between the two makes them incredibly powerful. Faced with this, Jun resumes his attack with the same confidence as before, but this time things are different. Every one of his attacks is repelled by the trigger arm and its wielder. After an intense battle, Jun can no longer withstand the onslaught, and he takes a punch so powerful that he succumbs to the pressure and is defeated. However, before they can celebrate, Tagao, a mysterious boy from the Akagami headquarters meeting, arrives on the scene. He announces that he's only there to collect his master and isn't looking for a fight, but he decides to take Sinus and Dex for himself. Hikaru insists on getting his friends back, and since he's not being paid for this, the Akagami member returns the mecha yudes without a fuss and leaves. The next day, Aki wakes up next to her metal arms and goes to Hikaru, who's stitching the hood where Alma stays. Embarrassed, she admits she got involved in this because a worm-type mecha yude killed her family, but it wasn't that green-haired guy. Finally, she thanks Hikaru for saving her and takes the stitching from his hands, saying she couldn't stand how slow he was being. Suddenly, Meru arrives, sees the scene, and assumes she's interrupting something romantic, but Aki doesn't care and snatches the cookies Meru was holding again. Alma thinks this time the cookies were for Hikaru and pulls the boy into a scuffle over the sweets, leaving the poor guy wondering what's going on with these people. When night falls, some members of ARMS discuss whether this whole situation is too much for Hikaru, until the transport truck from Kagami, which they had been waiting for, finally arrives. Inside the truck, a henchman celebrates that the shackle is working after the scientists removed its self-awareness, though there's still an unresolved issue with this mecha yude. On top of the vehicle, Hikaru tries to hide, questioning what the hell he's doing. Alma motivates his friend, reminding him they need to save their comrades, but the human asks the robot to lower his voice before they get discovered. At that moment, Oyama asks the boy for a status update, and Hikaru reports that there's a mecha yude user on the vehicle who seems dangerous. The more experienced ARMS member orders the rookie to stick to the plan, which is for Hikaru to activate the EMP given to him once they pass the interchange. Meanwhile, the enemy powers up his metal arm with a punch, reinforcing himself. Threatening Kagami's scientist, he orders the guy to inform him of anything that looks strong within those mecha yude cubes, even though the researcher isn't authorized to do so. Going against the plan, Alma decides to attack the truck driver, causing the vehicle to flip over. Without a second thought, Hikaru runs away without looking back. Alma explains he couldn't leave the cube behind at any cost, which he managed to grab during his surprise attack as the human dashes off. However, the truck is hurled straight toward them, blocking their path, and an explosive is thrown at them. After that, the hulking Kagami member demands his mecha yude be returned, and while Hikaru is practically shaking in his boots, Alma tries to figure out a way to avoid dying right there on the bridge, dragging the kid along. Seeing things are going south, Tani and Carrick's rush to assist the ARMS rookie. Meanwhile, the hulking enemy subdues them and fires another explosive at them. Afterward, he boasts about his power, thinking the fight is over, but the shot he fired ends up destroying the bridge and sending his mecha yude flying as Hikaru and Alma are no longer there. At the last moment, Tani manages to rescue the pair and get them to a safe spot, but the opponent quickly finds the escapees and chases after them again. This time, Aki shows up to prevent a tragedy, allowing Tani to grab Hikaru and make a run for it. Feigning surprise, the Kagami brute notices the girl has 2 mecha yudes, but he quickly reveals he has 3. He attacks without thinking, aiming his cannon at the opponent's head, but he ends up failing. Not only that, the brute simply collapses backward, exhausted, prompting Sinus and Dex to mock him for thinking he can use as many robots as he wants without any training. Regardless, Aki turns around and announces she's going to call the retrieval team, but an unknown element wraps around the brute's neck while her back is turned. When she looks back, she sees that the Kagami member has multiplied in size, turning into a true giant, and his attacks are now devastating, forcing the ARMS member to dodge as best she can, avoiding concrete blocks hurled at her. Even though the man is out of energy, it seems some unknown element is controlling him somehow. In any case, Hikaru arrives with all his strength beside Alma, who delivers a powerful punch that sends the rival flying backward. Aki complains that the kid was supposed to have left, but the enemy doesn't give them time for trivial arguments as he quickly gets back up and fires his cannon again. Surprisingly, Alma absorbs the impact, keeping his allies unharmed, and the opponent leaps toward the ARMS group to continue the fight. Hikaru meets him blow for blow, returning to the fray, and his movements are far more precise and effective than his enemies. Overcome with rage, Alma yells that mecha yudes aren't toys, delivering another blow that finally takes down the brute for good. After the victory, Tani arrives with several saved mecha yude cubes, saying it's all thanks to Hikaru. Meanwhile, Aki tries to figure out how the enemy managed to get back up and continue fighting after losing his energy. With the mission over, she returns to the base and heads for the shower, where memories of her sister flood back, moments when she said she was the princess while Aki is the hero. In other words, if anything happens to her sister, Aki will protect her. Plagued by these old memories, the girl gets out of the shower and picks up a family photo, staring at it for a while. After that, she leaves the bathroom and runs into Quen in the hallway, who has no idea how to act in front of a girl in home clothes and thinks it's the most indecent thing ever. Sinus and Dex cover up their host to keep the pervert from staring while he explains that he just came to give a report on what Aki requested. Unfortunately, the Kagami member they captured hasn't provided any information so far, and none of his 3 mecha youths were of the worm type. Aki, however, is certain it was a worm type based on how the man got back up after losing his strength. At 8 a.m. the next day, Alma wakes Hikaru and rushes him to avoid being late, while Aki shows up at the boys' window to speed things up because they need to head to school. Shortly after, she arrives with a devastated Hikaru, tossing him into his seat like a sack of trash. Around them, all the classmates assume it's a typical case of a couple in love, though that's far from the truth. Both the girls in class and Meru herself are chatting about a new student who recently transferred in and is filthy rich, but when Aki hears about it, she doesn't seem very interested. Out of nowhere, through the school's intercom system, a boy suddenly calls Hikaru to the rooftop. When he arrives, it's none other than Jun Kagami, the new student who claims he joined the school just to meet the protagonist and retrieve Alma. Aki and Hikaru immediately go after Kagami, but just as he's about to retaliate, Tado warns him through his earpiece not to break the promise on the very first day. Jun's condition for staying at the school was that he couldn't use his Mecha Yu there. With that, Jun informs his opponents that it will take some time for his Mecha Yu Ouroboros to adapt to his body, so he's decided to use this time to figure out what makes Hikaru capable of using the trigger arm. Once he figures that out, he plans to take it for himself. Faced with this threat, Aki charges at Kagami again, but Alma stops her, sensing that this boy knows something about his past. As the arms allies argue among themselves, Jun acknowledges that he can't attack Hikaru at school, but warns him to stay alert when he goes home that night. After the rooftop encounter, Aki gives Hikaru no peace, following him relentlessly, and the new kid does everything he can to get rid of her. Whether it's lunchtime or any other moment, she's always there, watching him closely to make sure Alma isn't captured. After much effort, Hikaru finally manages to distance himself from her for a while. At that moment, Kagami approaches again, trying to figure out how his opponent can use the trigger arm. In a conversation with Todo about the difference between him and Hikaru, Todo speculates that it might have something to do with their diets. Hearing that, Jun decides to treat his #1 rival to lunch. Alma notices that Jun is holding a super ultra black card, the kind only celebrities have, while Hikaru takes the opportunity to ask something about Alma. However, Aki arrives just in time to take the trigger arm and its host away. Before leaving, she makes it clear that if Kabun wants to buy lunch for someone, he should treat her to an all-you-can-eat yakiniku buffet of the highest quality. After that, Hikaru heads to the bathroom and laments Aki constantly being on their trail, thinking they'll never uncover anything about Alma's past that way. However, an idea hits him as today is the school's general sports tournament. Upon reaching the court, Hikaru participates in the event while searching for Jun Kagami, only to get hit in the head by a stray ball. Watching the pathetic scene, Jun wonders how someone capable of wielding the trigger arm can be so terrible at sports. As if to add insult to injury, Aki throws a ball from the neighboring court, hitting Hikaru's head again, using it as an excuse to rush to his aid. Meanwhile, Meru arrives and notices there's a competition over who gets to stay with Hikaru. Seeing this, she organizes a duel between Aki and Kagami to settle the matter, with her as the referee. Facing Kagami, Aki imposes the following condition. If she wins the fight, Jun will leave Hikaru alone. However, before the battle starts, the protagonist wakes up and, to prevent the fight, offers to pay for the yakiniku buffet Aki wanted. In exchange for her favorite meal, she agrees to stop the duel for now and walks away. With that, Hikaru finally gets a moment to talk to the young Kagami. Alma confesses that he knows nothing about his past, so Jun reveals that his family has information the trigger arm seeks. First, he shows a photo proving that Alma was once part of the Kagami family, as he's attached to Yakumo Kagami in the picture, the founder of the company that made the city of Kitakagami what it is today. Alma is devastated at the thought of having harmed other mecha youths alongside this group, but Jun doesn't know anything about that and tells them they'll have to figure that part out on their own. Meanwhile, Aki gets a call from Quen, who claims to have discovered something about a worm-type user. After the conversation with Jun, Hikaru and Alma head to the library to investigate the city's founding history. Inside, they find a huge portrait of Yakumo Kagami, which enrages Alma because of how much this society worships the Kagami family, even though they commit atrocities against mecha youths. At the same time, the robot feels overwhelmed by the sense that his past is right in front of him, but he still remembers nothing. Later, Aki finds the worm-type user who is holding Tani as a prisoner. At that moment, the user rips Carex from Tani's back and throws the human at his partner. She then crushes Carex until the mecha youth shatters into pieces. Sinus and Dex, consumed by rage, recklessly attack the worm user, but she easily dodges and attaches a device to Tani's back, causing the boy to attack his group mate. In the heat of the fight, Aki has no choice but to defeat Tani. Meanwhile, Hikaru hears what happened through his phone and rushes to help Tani and Carex. Wayama arrives at the same time and takes the injured straight to arms. Once there, scientists and doctors do everything they can to stabilize the human. Algis assures them that Tani will be fine, but he can't say the same for Carex. Hikaru suggests they could repair the robot with new parts, but Algis and Fist explain that mecha-U's are living beings just like humans and that they are life forms from another dimension, having lost their lands and companions. Ordella, who gave them life, was found on this planet with the help of humans, but during an attempt to awaken her, an accident occurred, causing Ordella to lose control. To seal her, Alma used all his energy and went into a deep sleep. In other words, Alma's lost memory is the only key to breaking this seal and activating Ordella. However, this power could fall into the wrong hands, which is why Arm's top priority is to prevent that from happening. In the midst of all this, Carex's vital signs are lost entirely. Investigating the case, Quen discovers some scars on the victim that weren't from the Ouroboros, and that the attacks by this worm-type mecha-Yun user have been increasing over the past few months. Aki is furious for not being informed earlier and grabs the scientist by his clothes, but he replies that he wasn't notified either and only found out because he hacked into Arm's database. With that said, Aki assumes that Algis knew all along and didn't tell her, so the scientist adds that probably the boss is investigating the case on his own since the first record dates back 8 years. Hearing these last words, the girl is thrown into a memory where she is surrounded by flames and screaming for her parents. Suddenly, the system alerts them to the presence of some unknown element at the base, and Quen suspects it might be the worm-type mecha-Yud, prompting Aki to rush there and accuse this element of having killed her father, mother, and little sister. Without waiting for a response, she attacks the unknown girl and demands she show her face. Without resistance, the girl reveals herself as Fubuki, Aki's sister. This revelation thrusts Aki back into a memory of playing with her little sister, where they were playing and Fubuki was asking Aki to properly save her. Back then, Sinus was Fubuki's mecha-Yud, while Dex belonged to Aki. At one point, their mother opens the door to the room and tells Fubuki it's her turn today, so she walks toward her mother. With an injured leg, Aki tries to follow but needs her sister's help. She apologizes for having to make her little sister go in her place, but the girl is understanding and doesn't mind. Overhearing the conversation, their mother highlights that they received a new mecha-Yud that day, and the young girl leaves for good with her doll in hand. Sometime later, a fire engulfs the place and Aki finds herself alone amid the blaze. In the middle of the tragedy, she finds Sinus Q in Fubuki's doll, but no sign of her sister. Thus, the child screams in despair. Returning to the present, Aki is speechless in front of this unbelievable revelation. Without delay, Fubuki joyfully embraces her best friend but soon starts coughing repeatedly, her body appearing very weak. At that moment, the worm-type mecha-Yud reveals itself through the girl's body and Sinus and Dex rush to subdue the machine. Aki displays all her fury against it, but the worm asks for calm to explain what's really happening. Shortly after, some members of ARMS arrive at the scene but find no one. After fleeing with her sister, Aki resumes accusing the worm of having killed her family that day, but the machine insists on being heard, as it was a misunderstanding. The girl argues that Sinus was there and recounted that the worm attacked her parents and her sister, besides having attacked other mecha-Yud users. Then Fubuki finally intervenes and promises that none of it was Amarilla's fault. Moreover, the girl reveals that the blame for their parents' death was hers. This revelation escalates the tension and Amaryllis tries to explain that it was an accident and the girl had nothing to do with it. If anyone is to blame for what happened, it was the mecha-Yud itself. In the end, Fubuki starts crying incessantly. Following this, we are thrown into a childhood memory of Fubuki on a day when she was playing with her favorite doll. Amaryllis explains that at that time they were trying to conduct an experiment to amplify Arbitrium using multiple mecha-Yud users, but there was an accident. The Arbitrium from Fubuki and hers caused a resonance phenomenon that no one understood, causing all the Arbitrium to spiral out of control. Amaryllis tried to rise with Fubuki to resolve the situation, but it only made things worse. As a result, the mecha-Yud was overwhelmed by Fubuki's panic-induced Arbitrium, causing the robot to lose control. In fact, Fubuki had wanted to see her sister all this time. She had been missing, but she thinks it was her fault that their parents died. In front of the human's tears, Amaryllis insists again that it's not her fault. Then Sinus tightens his grip on the worm's neck and again accuses her of having caused all this, as he was present in that room and saw everything that happened, including that the metal arm had tried to save Fubuki but couldn't. Next, Dex joins his companion to brutalize the worm-type machine, arguing that Aki is now suffering the consequences of that now. Lastly, Aki herself grips Amaryllis' head and asserts that she won't fall for this talk. Fubuki begs her sister to release the mecha Yude, saying her intention was only to make things better, but this stress causes the girl to faint. With that, Aki plans to take her sister to the doctor, yet Amaryllis warns that she and Fubuki have capabilities beyond any human doctor or arms because after the accident, Fubuki became unable to produce her own arbitrium. Until now, the two had managed to cope with the symptoms, but they might not be able to for much longer. Considering this, there is only one way to save the girl. Meanwhile, Hikaru and Alma start to worry about Aki's whereabouts, so the boy calls his friend but gets no response. At 8 a.m. the next morning, the metal arm wakes the human in a hurry as it's almost time for Aki to show up. Startled, the boy falls from the bed and looks out the window through which the girl usually appears. Then someone rings the doorbell and it's precisely his friend, visibly downhearted. Shortly thereafter, the two head to school and Alma whispers to Hikaru that something is off because Aki never enters through the front door, although the two thought this should be the norm. At that moment, Meru arrives with her usual cheer, wishing everyone a good morning and reminding them that exams are coming up, so she invites her friends to study together, including Kagami, who is idly behind a pillar and is startled by the girl's invitation. Anyway, he warns that he's not at school to study, as he's already mentioned, but Meru doesn't care and schedules the group study at Hikaru's house. Right then, Hikaru imagines this is going to be a complete disaster if it really happens, because surely bringing this crew together won't end well. However, Kagami reminds him that this could be his best chance yet to uncover the secrets of the trigger arm, so he changes his mind and agrees to the plan. Faced with the situation, Hikaru tries to argue with Meru that it's not a good idea, but she won't hear any excuses. Yet the toughest part is convincing Aki, as she insists she has another commitment. To turn the tables, Meru whispers to her friend that this is her chance to go to Hikaru's house, but Aki responds that she goes there every single day, which drives Meru crazy because she now realizes that this romantic comedy is in full swing. Nevertheless, Aki remains stony-faced, and the protagonist can't figure out what's gotten into her. Meanwhile, at ARM's headquarters, a member of the association wants to know where Aki has disappeared to, so Kwon reveals that he inadvertently involved her in a dangerous situation. Later, Amaryllis shares that she has the power to absorb arbitrium from other mecha Yude users, and she's been using this ability to nourish Fubuki with this substance, but the girl's illness is progressing quickly, and the machine is reaching its limits. Given this, Amaryllis questions whether Aki is prepared to do what must be done. At that moment, the human looks at her sister's favorite doll on her bed and recalls various moments with her little sister. Lastly, she remembers the only path Amaryllis indicated that could save Fubuki, the life of Hikaru Amatsuga. Shortly after, around the city, many people are affected by a sort of virus, which is linked to the worm-type mecha Yude activity. As they host worms in their bodies, they attack other people with nearly animalistic ferocity. Amidst all this, Aljust monitors every movement of the disaster with his spy cameras. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Alma wakes Hikaru with the usual rush and tidies up the room with the utmost enthusiasm. Looking out the window again, the human misses Aki. Around the city, doctors from Kitakagami struggle to cope with the infected, but the quarantine blocks are proving insufficient in the face of the true epidemic the city is experiencing. Aljust reports that they're receiving reports that mecha Yude users have lost control and started destroying things last night. As many civilians are getting hurt, all capable mecha Yude users must capture those responsible and put an end to this. Without delay, agents like Oyama are on the streets to control the situation. While subduing an infected member from Kagami, he wonders if the organization might be behind this. Meanwhile, Kagami itself is having problems among its members, as when pursuing infected users, Kazuha from Expansion 3 runs into a Gami from Shiro Garasu and the two begin to brawl. Quickly, Kazuha is defeated and left inconsolable. Then Tus arrives and wonders why he must work alongside such a fool. In the late afternoon, the study group heads to Hikaru's house, even though Aki hasn't shown up at all during the day. However, the protagonist receives a message on his phone and abruptly leaves his group running in the opposite direction. Soon, he shows up at Aljust to respond to an emergency and discovers that the worm suspected of causing the chaos in the city had contact with Aki, which leads the leader to suspect that the girl might be betraying ARMS, and thus she must be interrogated. Alma questions whether it's right to doubt a comrade, then Fist replies that comrades are just an illusion created by feelings, and one cannot run an organization based on feelings. Aki's interests and those of ARMS were aligned, and that's that, according to the mecha Yude leader. With that, Hikaru runs from there to find Aki before ARMS does. Quen appears along the way to warn that the protagonist needs a plan, and to assist in that regard, he reveals the presence of Wanner, the member of Expansion 3 who tried to kidnap Hikaru. According to the scientist, all the help will be necessary to find Aki. Meanwhile, Wanner's mecha Yude, Kajimaru, apologizes for the inappropriate behavior during their last meeting and accepts any punishment imposed, be it a kick, a punch, a roasting in a pan, or whatever it may be. With that said, Alma comments that he thought it was the human who controlled this metallic arm, not the other way around. Then Kajimaru explains that it used to be that way until he was freed by comrades from arms and became free again. In the end, the mecha Yude feels it is his duty to re-educate Wanner to be a warrior who fights in the name of Bushido, love, and justice to defeat evil and protect the weak. Wanner replies that, in fact, this thing has taken over his body for good. Then, Kajimaru beats the poor guy mercilessly. Later, already in the middle of the mission, the robot is still teaching the human how to be better through punches, while mentioning that his acoustic sonar can find the resonant frequency of Aki's arbitrium. Suddenly, to complicate things even more, Kagami appears out of nowhere and declares that he won't leave Hikaru's side until he discovers the secrets of Alma, until the trigger arm itself asks Kagami for help in this mission to find Aki, as they might still be able to study everyone together. Without delay, Turu discovers that Jun is meddling in this mess and plans to take measures, but now Kagami doesn't think that his brother's safety is the company's priority, so he orders Turu to just let the matter drop. Meanwhile, Kajimaru continues searching for Aki with his probe and follows where the signal is strongest until he reaches his target. Visibly shaken, Aki had asked Amaryllis if it really had to be Hikaru. Then Amaryllis explained that there is a special arbitrium in him capable of awakening the trigger arm. In exchange for his life, the mecha Yude promises to bring Fubuki back. Hours later, when Aki was already facing her friend, Fubuki was calm in bed and asking if her sister would be alright. Amaryllis assures that Aki will return with the mission accomplished because she loves her sister. Thus, the girl asks Aki to save her properly this time. Confused by his partner's sudden presence, Hikaru asks where she had been, but the girl ignores the question as she advances toward him. Alma mentions hearing that Aki was seen with a worm-type mecha Yude user, prompting Hikaru to ask if this had anything to do with her quest for revenge. At this moment, Aki doesn't answer his questions. Instead, she insists that Hikaru must come with her even if he refuses. With that, she lunges at him aggressively. Ironically, it was Kagami who prevented the attack from going further, as he considers the boy his prey and no one else's. Aki tries to remove Kagami from the equation, but his protection proves too strong to break easily. Despite her exceptional skills and metallic arms, the younger Kagami once again demonstrates his prowess by subduing his opponent with his nearly omnipresent chains. Thanks to the success of his strategy, the boy even has the audacity to gloat, saying the fight is way too easy. Suddenly, Hikaru grabs him from behind and tells him to stop the nonsense. This forces Jun to retract his chains, thereby freeing the rival. Likewise, the protagonist asks his friend to calm down before things get worse. He even agrees to help Aki with whatever she needs. Seizing the moment, Alma questions why the girl wants to take her host so violently. As the girl remains silent, Sinus reveals that Aki Murasame's sister, Fubuki, is still alive. Amaryllis, Fubuki's mecha Yude, says they need a large amount of arbitrium to save the young girl, and since Hikaru has awakened the trigger arm, he might be sufficient. Upon hearing this, Jun bursts into laughter, remembering that this Amaryllis caused a major accident a while ago and that everyone in the Kagami group knows about her. According to him, that mecha Yude only took Fubuki to use her as a hostage and manipulate Aki. Nevertheless, Hikaru agrees to go with Aki. After all, they are friends. Alma emphasizes that they are such good partners, they will even share a yakiniku meal together, and that only the power of friendship is needed to overcome this ordeal and fill up afterward. On the other hand, Kagami does not want to let the protagonist go with the girl, as he always makes it clear that he is the one who will destroy Hikaru to take the trigger arm for himself. Yet, Hikaru stands his ground and maintains his decision to go with his comrade. Not only that, he extends his hand and reaffirms his desire to help above all else. However, Aki rethinks her stance and decides to find another way to save her sister, as she doesn't want to rely on Hikaru's kindness to achieve her goal. The arbitrium was just the quickest way to resolve Fubuki's situation, but there are other ways. In the end, the woman makes it clear that she is not friends with Hikaru. What she truly wants is revenge, which is why seeing someone pretend to want to help just to feed his own ego is very annoying. At this point, even the girl's mecha Yude seem embarrassed by the harsh words, but Aki doesn't care about the consequences of her speech. She has already decided that this story will stay between her and her sister. Meanwhile, a member of the Arms has found data on Amaryllis on a backup server of the Kagami group. The accident report involving the mecha Yude states that she is test number 7. When the experiment went out of control, it caused an accident that left 4 fatalities, including Fubuki Murasame. Amaryllis is a worm type that can detach parts of herself to control humans. From this information, Quen analyzes the lip reading of Fubuki in the video they recorded. Amidst this, Aki returns to her dejected sister and informs her that Hikaru will not come with them, so the two will need to find another way out. With this, Fubuki cries out that her sister cares more about that boy than her, then hugs Aki and insists she's in tremendous pain and that her sister is letting her die just like last time. At this moment, Aki decides to use her own arbitrium to heal the little girl. Turning back to Hikaru, Alma says they need to follow Aki, but the young man is shaken after what he heard and begins to consider that indeed he only wants to help others to feel good about himself. In the end, he just doesn't want to get in the girl's way. Hearing this last phrase, Jun Kagami recalls when he said exactly that to his brother, so he hits up furiously and demands a reaction from Hikaru. For his part, Hikaru is also angry and knows very well what he wants to do about all this, but still feels bad about what he heard. Alma insists that, at this moment, all that matters is the feeling, and what the boy feels is that he must save his friend, and the robot knows well that the human doesn't want to do this just for self-satisfaction. After saying this, he asks Warner and Kagemaru to locate Aki again. In the meantime, Quen discovers that Amaryllis is controlling Fubuki at the moment, but still doesn't understand why this mecha Yude only appeared now with Aki's sister. Without warning, Algis arrives, startling the scientists and explaining that Amaryllis is after Hikaru Amatsuga's arbitrium. This worm-type mecha stopped hiding when she realized someone had awakened the trigger arm. Quen wonders why the boss didn't tell Aki about her sister. Then he explains that Aki couldn't handle knowing that the being who killed her family was using her sister as a puppet. Algis was trying to keep it a secret, but it seems that only made things worse. In the midst, Amaryllis tries to convince Aki that her arbitrium isn't enough. Therefore, Hikaru's is still necessary. Yet the girl refuses to use that solution. Then Fubuki raises her toy and says that every doll has its function. But since her sister isn't fulfilling hers, she needs to be punished. Then Fubuki throws her dolls at Aki, leaving her sister desperate with this grotesque behavior of the little one. Fubuki continues her speech, claiming she was nice to let her sister play the role of the heroine who saves the princess. In panic, Aki wants to know what this monster did with her sister. Then Amaryllis responds that Aki continues to do selfish things instead of playing the role she was given, which makes the mecha Yude very angry. After saying that, Amaryllis attacks the human with no intention of holding back. With the help of Sinus and Dex, Aki Murasame escapes the ferocity of the worm-type robot. Fubuki's dolls join the attack against the arms member, but she fights back fiercely, managing to repel the aggressors. At that moment, Fubuki still seems self-aware and pleads for her sister's help, as if she were still alive but under Amaryllis' control. Sinus and Dex fly into a rage and prepare to attack, but Amaryllis had only used Aki's sister to emotionally destabilize the 3 enemies. By doing so, she easily subdues them all with her chains. Soon, the supposed Fubuki approaches and calls her sister innocent. Then she decides to take control of her body, tired of the doll she is currently using. Sinus and Dex try to react, but Amaryllis is too strong. Controlling Fubuki, the mecha Yude approaches the sister and reminds her that it was just like last time, and that Aki's parents must have really liked this doll since they cloned her so much on the day of the accident. Regardless, Amaryllis killed them both without remorse and isn't afraid to admit this to the older daughter. With this revelation, Aki's eyes fill with tears. However, Hikaru appears with Alma and Kagami and punches Amaryllis. Aki even grumbles about the boy's presence after the kick she gave him, but he stands firm and declares he came to help his friend. Fubuki tries to grab Hikaru, but Kagami prevents it, and then Amaryllis joins the fray, managing to chain the young man. Similarly, Jun uses his chains to bind the robot, but she laughs at the human's attempt to use Ouroboros, a cheap copy of her, to destroy the original. Meanwhile, Alma feels his energy draining away as Amaryllis walks towards the protagonist to steal his arbitrium. This time, Aki steps in front and asserts she will protect her friend, but she is easily subdued by the powerful worm-type mecha Yude. She then prepares to end the story by capturing Amatsuga, but he resists with Alma's help, even though the enemy is visibly stronger. With her advantage, Amaryllis controls Hikaru and begins to drain his arbitrium. She reveals that this event resembles what happened 100 years ago, so Alma is puzzled by this talk, especially since Amaryllis just made it clear that she already knew about the trigger arm. Then, keeping Hikaru under her control, the worm goes after Aki. Feeling her life slipping away, the human feels like a failure for not being able to save her sister again, and being honest with herself, She begs for help at this crucial moment. It was then that Hikaru Amatsuga's eyes cleared, and he began to emit his arbitrium with greater intensity. Amaryllis feels that flow and enters a state of ecstasy as she steals all that strength for herself, but Hikaru and Alma react by further increasing the potency of the substance inside the enemy, making her metallic body shatter like glass. Soon, an explosion occurs and everyone thinks the situation is resolved, but Amaryllis appears again without significant damage. As Hikaru can barely move, Jun Kagami steps up and uses all his skill to turn the tide. Forming giant hands with his chains, he crushes Amaryllis with such impressive force that, although it takes some time to happen, he manages to smash the opponent and severely damage her body. At the same moment, Fubuki opens her eyes and sees her sister holding her. Still able to react, Amaryllis enters a rage and hurls her dolls at the enemies. Then Aki tells Sinus and Dex to prepare for what's coming, but it's Hikaru and Alma who first defeat the worm's puppets. This time, the two together manifest a devastating form that Amaryllis knows well, causing her to panic and attack them regardless. Demonstrating surreal skill, Hikaru dodges each blow and approaches the opponent's body, which was protecting itself at a distance with its robotic tentacles. When she lowers her guard, the protagonist delivers a punch to Amaryllis' eye, causing severe damage. In pain, the Mecha Yude blames Alma for the death of Yakumo Akagami and for all of them having turned into this. After finishing her speech, the worm is completely destroyed. Without delay, Alma reflects on everything he has recently discovered about his past and becomes saddened. At the same time, Fubuki states that her little sister is a true heroine. The next morning at 8 o'clock, Hikaru looks out his window as usual, looking for Aki. But once again, she is not there, at least until the boy turns to go back to sleep. Right then, the girl breaks his window and tells him to get ready to leave. On the way to school, Aki asks for her friend's help to study because she wants to teach Fubuki a few things. At the moment, the girl is receiving treatment from ARMS and will also be protected by the institution and her sister. Regarding helping the girl, Alma says this is the chance for Hikaru not to feel lonely in the morning, so the boy feels a bit embarrassed and tries to justify that he just got used to Aki popping up at the window every day. About this, Aki tells the boy not to worry, as she will continue to seek him out each day. Listening to this conversation on the slide, Maru's head over heels for what the girl said. Meanwhile, a director at Kagami is informed that the final tests of the activation sequence of the gate and the power supply of the Ordella are completed. With this, he will be able to open the portal to the world of the Mecha Yude and control everyone living there. However, he needs the trigger arm to activate the Ordella, and since he considers Department 3 a bunch of useless people, Tudu offers the services of Shiro Garasu, also known as the White Crows, but the director has no intention of working with this group. At Hikaru's house, Alma continues to ponder his unrevealed past. Meanwhile, Amaryllis is desperate to return to her body until a mysterious figure appears before her. The Mecha Yude is in despair and promises she didn't betray the man, yet he rips her from the body where she was hosted. Please subscribe for the next part and hit the like button. See you soon.